In the dark and endless expanse of space, a ship crash-landed on a strange and barren planet. Its once gleaming surface was now torn and battered, as if the ship had been through a brutal battle with something far beyond human strength. Inside the wreckage, there was only one occupant, a fierce alien girl, known throughout the galaxies as a warrior. She was not human, nor was she kind. Her eyes glowed red, filled with fury and rage, the kind of fury that had made her feared across worlds. Her race was one of warriors, bred to fight and conquer. She was part of a ruthless empire, trained to be an instrument of destruction. Her name was Zara, and she had been on a mission, one that had gone terribly wrong. The enemy had ambushed her ship in the most unexpected way. There was no time to defend herself. The last thing she remembered was the ship's engines roaring out of control, the sound of metal twisting, and the crash that threw her against the ship's walls. Now she lay on the cold, hard ground, her body battered and bruised, her breath shallow. Her wounds were deep, her blood staining the soil beneath her. She tried to move, but her limbs were weak, and the pain was unbearable. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to get up and fight, to escape, to survive. But her strength was gone. She was alone. The fire in her eyes was dimming, her strength fading, and with it, the fury that had made her a force to be reckoned with. And then, something unexpected happened. A human appeared. At first, Zara didn't recognize him. She had heard of humans, of course, but she had never encountered one before. She had always considered them weak, insignificant, and beneath her. But now, there he was standing in front of her, looking down at her with a mix of caution and curiosity. His face was covered with sweat, his clothes torn, but there was something in his eyes. It wasn't fear. It was pity. The human crouched down, his hands trembling as he examined her injuries. Zara growled, her voice low and dangerous, but the human didn't flinch. Instead, he extended a hand toward her. She snarled at him, baring her sharp teeth, warning him to stay away. She was a deadly creature, capable of slaughtering anyone who came near her, but the human didn't back down. His hand remained outstretched, and his gaze remained steady. "Don't worry," he said softly. "I won't hurt you." Zara's red eyes narrowed in disbelief. Did this human think he could just come here and offer her kindness? She was a soldier, a fierce alien, not someone who could be healed by a simple human touch. She was a weapon, trained to fight and conquer. She didn't need his pity, his compassion, or his help. She had never needed anyone, but something in the way he looked at her, with no fear, no hate, only a strange sense of empathy struck her. He wasn't afraid of her, and that was something Zara had never encountered before. Every life she had encountered had been filled with fear and hatred, but this human, he was different. With a grunt, she tried to push herself away, to get up and run, but her body betrayed her. Her legs buckled beneath her, and she collapsed back onto the ground. The human was still there, kneeling beside her, his hand now gently resting on her arm. "I'm not leaving you," he said, his voice calm, steady. "I won't leave you to die here." Zara stared at him, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The pain in her body was overwhelming, but it wasn't just the pain that tore at her, it was the confusion. Why was he helping her? She had never shown mercy to anyone. She had killed countless beings across the universe without a second thought. She had never needed help. But now, in this moment, she couldn't help but wonder if this human's presence was the only thing keeping her from dying alone in the wilderness. She blinked, her vision blurry. The human was still there. He hadn't moved, not even an inch. His eyes were still fixed on her, watching her as though he understood the pain she was in, both physical and emotional. Zara let out a frustrated snarl, her sharp teeth gleaming in the dim light. "Why?" she rasped. "Why are you helping?" "Me?" The human gave a small, almost sad smile. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "You don't have to be alone, and I won't let you die here." Zara felt something stir inside her, something she hadn't felt in years, a sense of vulnerability. She had been taught to trust no one, to rely only on her strength and her weapons. But here, with this human, that old way of thinking felt distant. Was it possible that she could find something in him she had never known? Compassion, understanding? But no, she was Zara, a warrior. She didn't need his help. She didn't need anyone. She tried to push him away, but the effort was in vain. Her body was too weak, and the human was too persistent. His touch, though, gentle, was like a lifeline, a reminder that there was something more than violence, more than war. Zara closed her eyes, allowing herself just a moment of rest. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a weapon. She didn't feel like a soldier. She just felt human, and maybe, just maybe, she could trust this human. At least for now, but the question lingered in her mind. Was this the beginning of something new? Or was she simply too broken to keep fighting? The human stayed by her side, waiting for an answer that Zara herself didn't yet have. This introduction sets up the conflict and suspense, drawing the audience in with the unexpected kindness of the human and the fierce but vulnerable alien girl, asterisk. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the desolate landscape. Zara lay on the cold, barren ground, her eyes half closed, staring at the stars. It was quiet too, quiet. The kind of silence that felt unnatural, like the calm before a storm. Her body throbbed with pain, but it was nothing compared to the agony of having her pride shattered. She had always been the one to control the battlefield, to dictate the terms of every fight. Yet here she was broken, helpless, at the mercy of a human. The human, whose name she still didn't know, hadn't left her side since he found her. He had done everything in his power to ease her suffering, from giving her water to dressing her wounds with makeshift bandages. His presence was constant, a quiet hum of energy beside her, as steady as the wind blowing through the dust. Zara wanted to scream. She wanted to tear into him with every ounce of her strength, but her strength was gone. She had never felt so weak, so powerless. The fierce warrior who had torn through entire armies, the killer who had brought worlds to their knees, was reduced to nothing but a vulnerable, helpless girl. And the human he was still there, still watching over her, still caring for her. She clenched her fists, her sharp claws digging into the dirt. "Why are you still here?" she hissed through gritted teeth, her voice raw and strained. "Why do you care?" "I'm nothing to you." The human didn't flinch. He simply sat beside her, his face soft and unreadable, his eyes never leaving hers. "Because you're not nothing," he replied quietly. "Everyone deserves help, even if they've done things they regret. You're not alone anymore." Zara's heart tightened in her chest. She had never considered that possibility. The thought of someone seeing her as something more than a weapon, more than a soldier, it was foreign to her. She had always been alone, always been the one who had to kill to survive. There was no room for weakness, no room for emotions like kindness. Her people had raised her to be strong, to be ruthless. Yet here she was, relying on the mercy of someone who should have been afraid of her. She didn't understand it. She didn't want to understand it. With a low growl, Zara pushed herself up, her body screaming in protest. She wasn't going to lie there any longer. She was a warrior. She would not let herself be some helpless creature in the hands of a human. She dragged herself onto shaky legs, ignoring the blinding pain coursing through her body. The human didn't try to stop her. Instead, he simply stood up and followed her, his footsteps soft but steady behind her. "You can't do this alone," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "I'm not going to leave you out here to die." Zara staggered forward, her vision blurry but her determination unwavering. "I don't need you," she snapped, her voice trembling with the effort. "I've survived far worse than this." But even as she spoke the words, she knew they were lies. Her pride had always been her strength, but now it was a weight around her neck, dragging her down. She was not invincible. She was not a god. The human reached out, his hand steady as it rested on her shoulder, offering support without words. Zara froze at the contact, the warmth of his touch sending an unexpected shiver through her. It was almost like an anchor, keeping her from falling. "You don't have to be strong all the time," he said, his voice low and soothing. "You don't have to do this alone." Zara looked at him then, really looked at him. There was no fear in his eyes, only a quiet strength, a patience that seemed to say, "I understand." It was a kindness she had never known. She had seen people beg for mercy before, but never had she felt it offered so freely, so without condition. The battle within her was fierce. She had been trained to believe that relying on others was a weakness. But here, in the midst of her pain, her confusion, and her helplessness, something began to shift. She wasn't just a killer. She was a being, a creature of flesh and blood. And maybe, just maybe, there was room for something else inside her? Something she had never dared to let grow. "I don't need you," she repeated, but this time the words felt hollow. The truth she had buried deep inside her, her fear, her loneliness came bubbling to the surface. The human smiled softly as though he could read her thoughts. "Maybe not, but I'll be here anyway." Zara didn't know why, but for the first time, she didn't push him away. The quiet weight of his words settled into her chest like something new, something fragile. She wasn't alone anymore. The human had decided that, no matter what, he wouldn't leave her side. And for the first time, she felt like she wasn't just a weapon, she was something more. The struggle to survive had begun in a way Zara had never imagined. It wasn't about physical strength or bloodshed. It was about something deeper, something that had been buried beneath years of violence and rage. It was the struggle to survive as something more than a warrior. It was the struggle to survive as a person. The days passed in a slow, silent rhythm. Zara's body had begun to heal, but her mind was still a battlefield. She couldn't escape the harsh truths that clung to her like a second skin. The weight of her past, her ruthless nature, the many lives she had taken, those memories were sharp, like daggers, always threatening to break free. But here with the human, the world felt different. And that difference was both terrifying and oddly comforting. She lay on the ground one evening, staring at the sky. The human whose name she had learned was Alex was busy gathering firewood a little farther from her. Despite the pain that still lingered in her body, there was a strange peace in the moment. For once, she wasn't planning her next move, calculating how to escape, or deciding who to kill. She wasn't the predator anymore, she was just existing. Har closed her eyes, allowing the cool breeze to brush over her face. She could hear the fire crackling softly in the distance, and the soft rustling of leaves as Alex moved through the woods. His presence was steady, a constant reminder that she wasn't alone, and yet she still didn't understand why he stayed. Why would a human risk so much for someone like her? A killer. A warrior. She heard his footsteps approaching, and her body tensed instinctively. Old habits died hard. But Alex didn't seem to notice. He sat down next to her, placing a bundle of sticks on the ground. His eyes met hers, calm and kind. "I brought you something," he said, his voice soft, as if not to disturb the fragile silence between them. Zara didn't answer at first, not trusting herself to speak. She could feel the old anger rising. In her chest, the bitterness of being dependent on someone who should have feared her. She wasn't weak. She wasn't meant to be a burden. She was a warrior, and warriors didn't rely on others. Alex noticed her hesitation and, without a word, pulled out a small object from his bag. It was a stone, smooth and warm from the firelight, carved with intricate symbols that meant nothing to Zara. She stared at it, puzzled. "This is from my people," Alex explained. "A token of protection. It's said to bring peace to troubled souls." Zara's heart skipped a beat. A peace offering? She didn't understand. Why would he give her this? She had taken everything from everyone she had ever known. She had destroyed planets, obliterated cities. She was not someone who deserved kindness, let alone protection. Alex noticed her confusion and smiled softly. "It's just a symbol, but I thought it might help." Zara took the stone, feeling its weight in her hand. It was warm, not from the fire, but from something else. Something intangible. She didn't know why, but she felt the urge to hold it tightly, as if it were a lifeline, pulling her back from the abyss she had always known. For the first time in years, the walls she had built around herself began to crack. Slowly, they started to fall away, piece by piece, as Alex's kindness seeped through. It was a slow, painful process, but it was happening. She could feel it. The following days passed in a blur of strange, quiet moments. Alex continued to care for her, offering food, water, and companionship. Zara, still hesitant, allowed it, even though every instinct screamed at her to reject his kindness. She wasn't supposed to need anyone. She wasn't supposed to feel anything but the cold, calculated certainty of war, but there were small moments when she couldn't help but wonder what life would be like without the constant fight, without the rage, without the bloodshed. Alex, on the other hand, seemed completely at ease with her presence. He talked to her as if they were equals, as if he didn't see the warrior she once was. He saw something else, something fragile, something worth protecting in Zara. She couldn't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, he was right. Maybe she wasn't just a killer. Maybe she wasn't just a weapon. Maybe there was more to her than the anger that had consumed her for so long. One evening, after a long day of silence, Alex spoke again. This time, his voice was different. It was gentle but firm, as though he had made up his mind about something. "I know you don't trust me," he said quietly, "but you should know I'm not here to change you. You don't have to be anyone but who you are, but maybe you could give peace a chance, just for a while." Zara looked at him, her sharp eyes searching his face for any hint of mockery or fear, but there was none. Just sincerity. "Just trust?" "You're wrong," she said softly, the words feeling strange on her tongue. "You don't know who I am." "I don't," he agreed, "but I'd like to." Zara looked down at the stone in her hand, turning it over and over, letting its warmth sink into her palm. For the first time in her life, she felt like there was a choice in front of her. A choice she could make. She wasn't bound by the bloodshed, the fighting, the endless wars. She wasn't the same fierce warrior who had fought for power, for domination. She didn't have to be and for the first time in a long while, Zara allowed herself to feel something else, a strange, almost foreign feeling, hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could be more than what her past had made her. The night was colder than usual, the chill biting through the thin fabric of Zara's clothes. The fire flickered weakly, casting long, dancing shadows across the ground. Zara sat alone at the edge of the camp, her back to the fire. Her body was healing, but there were still parts of her that felt broken, parts that couldn't be fixed by mere physical care. Alex had gone to sleep hours ago, but Zara couldn't rest. The quiet, peaceful nights were becoming more difficult to bear. She had always been surrounded by noise, the sound of weapons clashing, the roar of battle, the cries of victory and defeat. But here, in the stillness, all she could hear was the echo of her own thoughts. And they were loud, screaming at her from within. She wasn't used to silence. She wasn't used to this strange feeling of vulnerability creeping in. She was supposed to be strong, untouchable. She had always been the one who struck first, who controlled the battlefield. But now she was just human, just Zara, an alien, who had once been part of an empire built on bloodshed. Zara's sharp eyes moved to the stars above. They were so distant, so cold. She had once looked at them with a sense of superiority, believing that the vastness of the universe belonged to her people, that their empire would span across the stars. But now the stars seemed empty. The galaxy seemed distant, as if it no longer cared about her. The weight of her past pressed heavily on her chest. She had been trained to be a killer, raised in a world that had taught her to hate. Her people, her empire, they had stripped away anything that wasn't useful for war. There had never been room for compassion, for understanding. She had been a weapon, nothing more. She flinched at the thought, her fists tightening involuntarily, but then she heard his voice. "Zara?" She didn't respond immediately. She didn't want to. She didn't want to show him the cracks in her armor, the pain she had buried for so long. She had always prided herself on being strong, stronger than anyone, stronger than anything. But here, with Alex, she was starting to feel weak. And that terrified her. Alex walked over to her, his movements quiet but purposeful. He sat beside her, but not too close, giving her space. He knew her well enough by now to respect that. "You're still awake," he said gently, looking up at the stars with her. I thought maybe you could use some company. Zara didn't look at him. She couldn't. I don't need company, she replied, her voice low, barely audible. I'm just dunking. Alex didn't say anything at first. He simply sat there, quietly observing her. He had learned that Zara's silence was her way of pushing him away. It was her defense mechanism. She didn't trust anyone, not even him, and that was okay. He wasn't going to force her to open up, but the silence stretched between them, thick and heavy, like a fog she couldn't escape. You know, Alex began, his voice soft, I get the feeling there's more to you than just the warrior I've seen. Zara's heart skipped a beat as she finally turned to look at him. His eyes were steady, searching, but not with judgment. He wasn't asking her to reveal anything. He was simply offering her a chance to speak if she wanted to. She felt her throat tighten. The words that had been locked away for so long seemed to rise to the surface, pushing against the walls she had built around them. She had never spoken of her past, not to anyone, not even to herself. It was too painful. But now, sitting beside Alex, the weight of it felt too much to bear alone. Zara swallowed hard. I didn't always want to be like this, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I wasn't always a warrior. I wasn't always like this. Alex didn't interrupt. He simply waited, giving her the space to continue. I was born to fight, she said slowly, her eyes fixed on the fire. But I didn't choose it. It was the only life I knew. My people ... they raised us to be soldiers. There was no room for anything else. No room for weakness. No room for kindness. We were taught that our worth was measured by how many we could kill, how many we could conquer. Her fists clenched again, and she looked away, ashamed of the words that were spilling out. She wasn't sure why she was telling him this, why she was letting him see the parts of her she had fought so hard to bury. Alex, sensing the shift, gently placed a hand on her shoulder. It wasn't forceful. It wasn't an attempt to comfort her. It was simply an offer of support. A sign that he was there without judgment. I didn't want to be a killer, Zara continued, her voice shaking. But that's all I knew. And when I joined the Empire, it was too late. They trained me to be ruthless, to be feared, to be a weapon, and I became one. I killed ... countless beings. I've destroyed entire worlds, and for what? She paused, the weight of her words settling in the air around them. For what? She repeated softly, almost to herself. Alex didn't answer immediately. He didn't need to. His silence spoke volumes, an understanding that went beyond words. Zara's shoulders sagged, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel something other than anger and guilt. I thought that killing was the only way to be strong, she said, her voice barely a whisper. But now, I'm not so sure. The fire crackled, breaking the silence, but the moment felt significant, like something inside her was beginning to shift. For the first time, Zara allowed herself to acknowledge the pain she had carried for so long. The guilt, the regret, the weight of the lives she had taken. And for the first time, Zara didn't feel the need to hide it. She didn't need to be the fierce, unyielding warrior anymore. She didn't need to pretend. Alex didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. And for the first time, Zara allowed herself to feel vulnerable, to feel like she wasn't alone. The wind had grown colder, and the nights seemed longer now. Zara still sat by the fire every night, her gaze drawn upward to the vast expanse of stars. But something had changed within her. The anger that had once consumed her, the burning desire to conquer, to destroy, was slowly fading. She couldn't quite explain it, but the feeling was undeniable. The more she spent time with Alex, the more she felt like she was becoming something different. It wasn't just physical healing anymore. Her body was recovering from the wounds she had sustained during her crash, but deeper wounds, ones that were older, darker, had begun to shift as well. Her sharp, predatory instincts were still there, lingering beneath the surface, but now they felt dulled, softer. And that terrified her. Zara had always believed in one thing. Strength was power, and power was all that mattered. But now, She was beginning to question that belief. Alex had taught her something that she couldn't shake off, that strength didn't have to come from destruction. It could come from vulnerability, from trust, from kindness. It felt unnatural, alien even, but there was a part of her that was drawn to it. A part of her that wanted to learn what it felt like to be something more than a weapon. Something more than just a warrior. One evening as the fire burned low, Alex returned from gathering food. He handed her a small bundle of fruit, his eyes glancing over her silently as she took it. She didn't respond, but the silence between them felt different, more comfortable now. The tension that had once clung to her every movement was slowly dissipating. "How are you feeling?" Alex asked casually, sitting down beside her. Zara hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. "Better," she muttered, though the word didn't feel like enough to explain the transformation that was happening inside her. She wasn't just healing physically, she was evolving in ways she couldn't fully understand. It was as if the pieces of her that had been shattered in battle were beginning to come back together, slowly but surely. And the more she sat with that feeling, the more she realized just how much she had been missing. "You've been quiet lately," Alex added, a touch of concern in his voice. "Is something wrong?" Zara stared at the fire, trying to find the right words. "I don't know who I am anymore," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. Alex said nothing for a long time. He simply watched her, his expression calm and patient. He didn't push her, didn't try to fill the silence with empty words. "I've always been a warrior," Zara continued, her hands clenching at her sides. "That's all I've known, that's all I've been. But now, everything is changing." "You don't have to be what you've always been," Alex said softly, his voice almost too gentle. "You can be more than just a warrior," Zara laughed bitterly. "You don't understand. I've killed. I've destroyed entire civilizations. I've been taught to do that, to live for battle, to fight for conquest. It's the only thing I'm good at." "You're more than that," Alex replied firmly, looking directly into her eyes. "You're not just your past. You're not just the things you've done. You have the choice to become someone else, someone better." Zara flinched at his words. The idea of being something other than a weapon was almost too foreign to imagine. She had spent her entire life sharpening herself into the perfect tool of destruction. And now, to be told that she could be something else? It seemed like a betrayal to everything she had ever known, but then she thought of the way Alex had treated her. Not as an enemy, not as a monster. He had seen her as a person, something she had almost forgotten she could be. A strange, almost painful feeling stirred in her chest. She felt torn between the old, familiar need to dominate and the new, unsettling desire to change. She didn't know how to reconcile the two, how to merge the warrior she had been with the person she was becoming. For the first time, she felt truly lost. But there was a strange comfort in that, a sense of freedom. "I don't know if I can change," she admitted, her voice wavering slightly. "You don't have to change all at once," Alex said with a gentle smile. "You can take it one step at a time, and if you fall, I'll be here." Zara looked down at the stone he had given her all those days ago. She hadn't realized it at the time, but the stone had become a symbol for her, something more than just an object. It had become a reminder that peace was possible, that change, though difficult, wasn't impossible. And for the first time, Zara began to believe it. The next day, Zara found herself doing something she never thought she would, something she thought she had forgotten how to do. She reached out to Alex, offering a small gesture of trust. A small, almost unnoticeable gesture, but a gesture nonetheless. As the two of them sat together by the fire, Zara found herself laughing at something Alex had said, a small chuckle, almost shy. It felt foreign, awkward even, but also freeing. For the first time, she wasn't planning her next attack, her next kill. She was just present, just here, and that was enough. Her transformation was only beginning. But for the first time, Zara felt a glimmer of hope. That maybe, just maybe, she could become something more. Something beyond the warrior she had been. Perhaps for the first time, she could become herself. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky bruised with dark purple hues. The air was thick with anticipation, a heavy, unsettling feeling hanging over the camp like a storm cloud. Zara sat by the fire, her fingers tracing the worn edge of the stone Alex had given her, the smooth surface cool against her skin. She had grown accustomed to the quiet, peaceful nights by his side, but tonight, something felt different. There was a sudden rustle in the distance, a sound that didn't belong. Zara's ears twitched, her sharp eyes narrowing as the familiar instinct to fight surged within her. Her senses were on high alert, but she held herself still, listening, waiting. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of unfamiliar beings, the sharp tang of alien species. Her heart rate quickened. Alex had sensed it too. He stood up from where he had been tending to the fire, his movements swift but calm. "Stay here," he whispered, his voice laced with tension. "I'll check it out." Zara's gaze hardened, her body brimming with the urge to move. Her warrior instinct screamed at her to protect him, to fight, to do what she had been trained to do. But she held herself back, her fingers curling around the stone in her hand. Something about this felt different. The fear in Alex's voice, the urgency in his steps, this wasn't just another battle. This was something more. Before she could make up her mind, a loud crash shattered the silence. The sound of something heavy hitting the ground, followed by the low growl of alien voices, reached Zara's ears. Her muscles tensed, the tension in the air crackling with the threat of violence. Without a second thought, Zara pushed herself to her feet, her body moving on its own as she slipped into the shadows. The pain in her side had returned, but she ignored it. She was a warrior. She couldn't afford to feel weakness now. The group of alien soldiers emerged from the underbrush, their figures silhouetted against the dim glow of the fire. Zara recognized them immediately, their markings, their armor. They were from her past. From the empire she had once served. Her blood ran cold as memories of past battles flooded her mind. These soldiers weren't just any warriors. They were the ones sent to eliminate those who failed, those who strayed from the path of the empire. They had come for her. Alex had no idea who these beings were, what they represented. But Zara did. These soldiers would not hesitate to kill him if they believed him to be a threat, and that was the moment Zara realized the true test she was facing. She had spent her entire life running from her past, fighting to remain a warrior. But now, standing between the life she was trying to build with Alex and the empire that had once owned her, Zara knew there was no turning back. She couldn't be both. She couldn't protect Alex and remain loyal to the empire that had created. Her heart pounded in her chest as the soldiers advanced. They hadn't seen her yet. She still had time, but she didn't move. She stood there, frozen, her mind racing. She knew what she had to do. The question was she strong enough to do it? Zara turned to look back at Alex, who had retreated into the shadows behind her. He was unaware of the danger, unaware of the past she was now being forced to confront. Her eyes locked onto his for just a moment, a silent communication passing between them. She had protected him. She had kept him safe for so long, but could she continue to do so? A voice broke through her thoughts, a familiar, cold voice. "Zara, you've made your choice." The leader of the soldiers stepped forward, his eyes glowing with recognition and disdain. "You've betrayed us." Zara's chest tightened, the weight of his words bearing down on her. She had always known this moment would come, but now that it was here, it felt heavier than anything she had ever faced. The leader's gaze flicked to Alex, his eyes narrowing. "You've chosen this human over us, over your people?" Zara's fingers tightened around the stone in her hand, her jaw clenched. The warrior in her wanted to fight, to kill. It was what she was trained to do, what she had always done. But the human side of her, the side that Alex had nurtured, the side that she had tried so desperately to hide, was now speaking louder than the bloodlust. Alex stepped forward, his face showing no fear, but Zara could see the uncertainty in his eyes. He didn't understand. He didn't know what these soldiers were, what they had come for. But Zara did. And for the first time in her life, she didn't want to fight. "I'm not one of you anymore," she said, her voice calm but filled with a conviction she had never known. "I'm done with this." The leader's eyes widened in disbelief. You're abandoning your people, your empire ... for a human? Zara stepped forward, her movements slow but deliberate. I'm not abandoning anyone, I'm choosing my own path. The soldiers hesitated, exchanging glances. The leader barked in order, but Zara's decision had already been made. She was no longer a part of their empire. She was no longer a weapon, she was a person. And she was not going to let them take that away from her. With one swift motion, Zara lunged, her claws slashing through the air. The soldiers reacted quickly, but they were too slow. She had become more than just a warrior, she was something else now. Something that fought not for destruction, but for the life she had built with Alex. The battle was swift, brutal, but in the end it was Zara who stood victorious, her chest heaving with exhaustion. The soldiers lay defeated around her, their weapons scattered across the ground. She turned to Alex, who was standing behind her, his eyes wide with shock but filled with gratitude. Are you all right? She asked, her voice hoarse. Alex nodded. Slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. I'm okay, but what are you going to do now? Zara's gaze softened. She didn't have all the answers. She didn't know what the future would hold. But for the first time in her life, she felt like she had the power to choose. She had chosen Alex, chosen this life, and whatever came. Next, she would face it on her own terms. Now, Zara said, her voice steady, I'm going to live. The dust settled over the battlefield, leaving only the echoes of the struggle behind. Zara stood in the midst of it, her chest rising and falling with each labored breath. The remains of the soldiers who had once been her comrades lay scattered around her, their blood mixed with the dirt beneath her feet, the remnants of a war she no longer wanted to fight. She looked around, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The echoes of her past seemed to resonate with every breath she took. For so long she had believed in only one thing, the power to destroy. The Empire had taught her that. But now, surrounded by the fallen and the wreckage of her past, she realized just how far she had come, and yet the cost of that change was far more than she had ever anticipated. The fire that had burned so fiercely within her for so long had dimmed, replaced with a quiet, almost unbearable ache. She could feel the shifting of the world inside her, the changes that had come with every moment spent with Alex, every choice she had made to step away from the Empire, from the life of a soldier. But now, as the alien forces retreated into the night, Zara knew that her transformation, her journey toward becoming something new, had only just begun. Alex stepped beside her, his expression unreadable as he looked down at the bodies. His eyes flicked to Zara, full of both concern and awe. He had been at her side through every battle, every moment of doubt, but this ... this was different. The stakes had never been higher. The decision she had made to stand against her past, to protect the life she had chosen, was no longer just a matter of survival. It was a matter of sacrifice. They'll come for us again, Alex said, his voice quiet but firm. We can't stay here, not for long. Zara nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. She was torn. She had never thought about the consequences of her choices in such stark terms. There were always more battles to fight, more enemies to defeat, more ways to prove her strength. But now, standing here beside Alex, she understood something deeper. It wasn't about fighting anymore. Alex had become more than just a companion. He had become the reason she fought. He had offered her something she had never known: peace, love, a chance at a life that wasn't defined by bloodshed. But that life came at a price. Zara's eyes flicked to the horizon, where a storm was brewing in the distance. The alien forces had retreated, but she knew it wasn't over. Her past was never far behind. The empire she had once served would never let her go. And Alex, he would be in danger as long as he stayed by her side. We need to leave, Zara said, her voice resolute but heavy with the weight of the truth. You need to leave, I'll hold them off. Alex's eyes widened, his hand reaching out to grasp hers. What are you saying? We can leave together, we can... No, Zara interrupted, her voice steady but full of an undeniable sorrow. They'll never stop hunting me. You can't protect me forever. I've brought enough danger to you. It's time for me to end this. Alex stared at her, disbelief written across his face. Zara, no, I won't let you do this. I'm not leaving you. Zara pulled her hand from his, stepping back with a look in her eyes that Alex had never seen before. It was one of finality, of peace, a peace that came with a terrible price. She had been fighting her entire life. She had fought for her people, for power, for survival. But now, for the first time, she was choosing something different. She was choosing love. She was choosing Alex, but to protect him, she would have to sacrifice everything she had known. You have to, she said softly, her voice breaking. If you stay with me, they'll destroy everything you've ever known. Your people, your world. I can't let that happen. I can't let them take everything from you. Alex opened his mouth to argue, but the words died on his lips as he looked into her eyes. He saw the truth there. He saw the depth of the sacrifice she was willing to make. He knew she was right. Zara turned away from him, her back straight, her gaze fixed on the horizon. This is the only way, she whispered, more to herself than to him. This is the only way I can keep you safe. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The wind picked up, the howling gusts carrying the scent of something far more dangerous. Zara knew that the Empire wouldn't rest until they had her, until they had destroyed everything she had built here. Alex stepped forward, reaching for her again, but Zara held up a hand, stopping him. Her eyes softened, but there was no doubt in them. The decision had been made. I love you, she said, her voice steady but filled with an emotion that made her chest tighten. But this is something I have to do, for both of us. And with that, she turned and walked toward the ridge, her figure silhouetted against the darkening sky. Alex watched her go, his heart heavy with a pain he couldn't name. He had never imagined that the woman he had come to love, this fierce, broken alien girl, would be the one to make such an impossible choice. But he knew there was no changing her mind. Zara had already given everything for him, for their future. And now, she was willing to give the one thing she had left, herself. The silence between them was deafening as Zara reached the top of the ridge, her form a mere shadow against the storm clouds. She turned one last time, her eyes meeting his for a fleeting moment. Then, with a final, determined step, she disappeared into the darkness. Alex stood there, frozen, unable to move, as the weight of her sacrifice settled over him. In that moment, he understood. Zara had not just given her past, her power, her strength. She had given him the greatest gift of all, her heart.